Madam President, I've come to the floor on numerous occasions this year to discuss the distressed state of America's middle class. In fact, on our committee, we've had a series of hearings looking at the state of the middle class and what's happening to the middle class in America. In recent decades, our nation's once secure middle class has struggled in the face of stagnant wages, declining job security, rising indebtedness, and disappearing pensions, not to mention sharply higher costs for health care, education, food, and energy. But, Madam President, it wasn't always this way. In the 3 decades after World War II, America's middle class grew rapidly. Incomes rose steadily as the middle class secured its fair share of the expanding national wealth. The federal government invested generously in infrastructure building, innovation, education, vastly expanding opportunity for people to move into the middle class. America became a more equal, fair, and just society built on a solid bedrock of a strong middle class. I am an example of that. My father had an 8th grade education, was a coal miner. My mother was an immigrant with very little formal education. Yet their 3 children were able to go to good schools, get good jobs, and get an education. All 3 of their children graduated from Iowa State University, a great land-grant college, because it didn't cost very much, and we could afford to go there. And we were able to enter the middle class from those humble beginnings. But beginning in the 1970s, much of that progress started to come to a halt. Our manufacturing base declined. The U.S. economy became increasingly dominated by financial markets and Wall Street, a trend that was accelerated by ill-advised deregulation. Soaring profits and sky-high salaries attracted more of our nation's best and brightest to pursue careers in science at the expense of engineering and teaching, public service. Wall Street bankers were emboldened by deregulation. They were incentivized by huge salaries and bonuses to take ever greater risks, and they devised ever more exotic and risky investment schemes. As we all know, in 2008, this frenzy of greed and recklessness culminated in the catastrophic meltdown of our nation's financial system. This economic crisis was a hammer blow to our already struggling middle class. The value of Americans' homes and retirement accounts plummeted. Millions lost their jobs or were forced into a foreclosure. Hopes for the future dimmed. In the wake of this financial crash, with its pervasive collateral damage to the middle class, the American people demanded action to rein in the worst abuses of Wall Street and to prevent a replay of 2008. This led to the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Let me repeat that, the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the most sweeping reform of our financial system since the Great Depression. For hundreds of millions of American consumers in their everyday lives, no aspect of this law is more important and transformative than the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Again, read the words of the legislation. It's the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Therefore, a big part of the bill was to build in consumer protections. One of that was to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I've come to the floor today in strong support of the nomination of Richard Cordray to be director of this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, the idea behind this bureau is very simple. We need a cop on the beat looking out for the best interests of consumers who use financial products, just as we have regulators looking out for the financial health of banks. A strong Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will ensure that consumers are not lured into debt through hidden fees, for example. It will simplify disclosures, reduce paperwork so consumers aren't faced with mountains of paperwork they can't understand. It will oversee providers of consumer credit, such as payday lenders, which for years have acted like banks without facing any kind of banking regulation. Additionally, as student debt surpasses credit card debt as the largest source of consumer debt, which that has already happened, by the way, student debt right now is bigger than credit card debt. The Bureau, this Consumer Protection Bureau, can play a critical role in helping families better understand the increasing challenges of facing a college education and financing it, as well as bringing some sanity to the private student loan marketplace. Finally, a key function of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will also provide help to our veterans through the Office of Service Member Affairs, the Office of Service Member Affairs. Sadly, too often, our service members fall victim to abusive financial traps upon their return home. The Bureau has made an outstanding choice for leadership of this office with the selection of Mrs. Hollister Petraeus. But cynically, my Republican colleagues have chosen to protect the unscrupulous lenders who prey on military families. They would rather neuter the entire agency, have no director, than to fully empower Ms. Petraeus to protect military personnel and their families from all forms of predatory lending activities. These steps are essential elements of helping to tilt the scales of our economy back into balance, so that once again we put the interests of the 99% of Americans who use financial products ahead of the 1% who profit from them. I was deeply disappointed when our Republican colleagues voted against the Wall Street Reform Bill. It should have been an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill, but now the bill is law. And guess what? My Republican friends are doing everything in their power to prevent it from doing its important job. Earlier this year, 44 Republican senators served notice they would not confirm anyone. Let me repeat, they would not confirm anyone to the position of director unless structural changes are made to the Bureau that would effectively take away its ability to stand up for consumers. The changes they've demanded are unfair and unreasonable. No other independent financial regulator has its rules subject to veto by other regulatory agencies. To suggest that the only regulator whose primary mission is to protect everyday hardworking Americans should face unprecedented levels of oversight simply does not make sense. Once again, Republicans have brazenly put the interests of Wall Street, payday lenders, unscrupulous mortgage lenders ahead of the interests of Main Street consumers. Mr. President, to restore the middle class to its place as the bedrock of our economy, we need a financial system that works for them. This means a financial system where consumers choose services based on a full and transparent understanding of the cost of those services. But absent a director, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau won't be able to supervise payday lenders or debt collectors or private student lenders. It will be able to make it easier for the good actors in the financial system, our community banks, for example, or our credit unions, to compete against those who are making a large profit by unfairly taking advantage of unsuspecting consumers. Mr. President, Richard Cordray is a superb choice to serve as the first director of this Bureau. As Attorney General of Ohio, he was a strong but fair advocate for consumers. His work has earned him the endorsement of bankers, CEOs, and civil rights leaders across the state of Ohio. He is a public servant of the highest caliber who deserves to be given the opportunity to lead this critically important Bureau. As a matter of fundamental fairness to hardworking Americans on Main Street, we need an effective, even-handed Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Mr. Cordray deserves the opportunity to lead this new Bureau. I call upon my Republican colleagues at long last to put the interests of consumers ahead of the interests of those whose reckless pursuit of profits and bonuses have caused so much harm to our society and economy. I call upon my Republican colleagues to ignore the legions of Wall Street lobbyists who are urging them to disable and, if possible, kill the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Richard Cordray is a dedicated and impartial public servant who will put the best interests of American consumers first. We should give him that opportunity. I hope that my colleagues will join me in strongly supporting his nomination. Mr. President, I yield the floor.